Welcome to the Power Platform Show. Thanks for joining me today. I hope today's guest inspires and educates you on the possibilities of the Microsoft Power Platform. Now, let's get on with the show. In this episode, we'll be focusing on the role of the developer, the consultant, from the perspective of a Power Platform skeptic. Today's guest is from Lithuania. He works at McCaw, Lithuania as a Power Platform Dynamics CE consultant and developer. He has a strong background in project leadership and consultancy, having coordinated Scrum teams and engaged directly with clients as part of his consulting career. You can find links to his bio, socials, etc. in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the show, Dovydas.
Yeah, thanks.
Did I?
Dovydas.
Dovydas.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, it's actually a funny thing. I'll start by saying, as I'm always doing when I'm meeting new customers or clients, usually I say for people that if it's really difficult to pronounce my name, go by David. Because I think Dovydas is just the different kind of David. I think it goes from Old Hebrew and the more popular version in Lithuania. But in general, it's the same name as David or David.
Yes.
So, choose the one that you like. If you're happy with it, you can. You can go with whichever you like one the most. Yeah, but thanks for having me. It's really interesting to be here.
Good to have you on. I always like to start with food, family, and fun. What do you do when you're not deep in technology?
Yeah, it's starting with the controversials, are we? So actually, I'll start with the food because I was thinking to myself, hearing that you're asking this question to everyone, is that I'm not really much into this, expensive and posh cuisine. So I'm a comfort food guy, and it really entangles a lot with the fun that I'm doing. Basically, my spare time goes a long way with cycling and mountain biking. So usually this kind of food tradition follows along with a long ride with the fellows, 4 hours on the saddle. And then you stop at some gas station, get a hot dog or Coke or Sprite, in hot summer's day. So that's my food, basically. The soul food that I'm having. I haven't had better experience than ice cream after a long ride or after some big journey. So that's the food and fun. And actually the family is also quite entangled. So we're spending our days with the missus and the dog. All three of us are actually spending most of our time at home. So we're basically sitting at the same room for 8 hours a day. And then, we're still spending another, hours at home. When it's summer, when we're riding our bikes, maybe a bit less together. But basically, yeah, we have this really harmonious and peaceful kind of living here in Lithuania. So and all of these experiences are really entangled to one another. So that's basically how it is.
I like it. Tell me about Lithuania. I know very little about it.
Well, honestly, it's I don't even know where to start. If I would, people sometimes are asking me what to see in Lithuania, and it's really difficult to pinpoint any one particular, artifact or building or a hill or something, because it's pretty much a flatland. So we don't have very well, big mountains or very majestic nature, but it's very foresty area. A bit reserved people, so something that you would encounter more in the northern countries. So Lithuanians are usually more reserved, more careful, but really kind of warm and nice people. It's just that a little bit reserved. In general, the country itself, once it was a superpower of Europe together with Poland, and then we still are kind of, really into it. We are really proud of our ancestry, and we're trying to uphold our identity within the Europe, because Lithuania and Latvia in general are only two nations in Europe that are still originating from the Baltic tribes. So we have our own distinct language. It's not Slavic, it's not Latin or Germanic or even Scandinavian. It's its own. So yeah, it's there's more history about Lithuania than actual, things to pinpoint. We don't have Eiffel Tower, we don't have, Great Canyon or even sharks, in our coastal areas. But in general, it's interesting. It's a country that you need to, work, get some elbow grease until you get to like it, basically. So in short, this is how it is in Lithuania. It's a country that you need to experience, I guess, and it doesn't come in a week, I would say.
Interesting. I love that many of the phrases that you've used are very familiar to me, like elbow grease and the missus. I mean, it's very, we use that in New Zealand quite a bit.
Yeah, this is one of the British in me, basically. I really am a big fan of British culture and this,
nice.
And the whole diet. Well, I find that the language itself very beautiful, the English. Sometimes you're taking it for granted because it's the language that you're using for business mainly and communicating. But
yes.
But if you read into it and the terms and everything, and when you're starting to compare it with your mother tongue, with your natural language, it becomes really clear that some expressions are really nice and nice sounding. So I'm trying to include as much as possible into my vocabulary because it just makes the language so much more fun to speak into and use.
That's so cool. How big is the tech community in Lithuania?
Well, the whole country is small, so to say that the tech community is big, it's not very big. It's growing, and I think it's now making a considerable piece of our, in general, working force, especially fintech area in Lithuania and in general, yeah. So it's growing. I wouldn't say that it's really big. It's still, it's not the sector that is comprising the most working space in the country. But yeah, I would say it's something that is very average, especially, for example, in Power Platform. If we would speak in more precise terms, it's, I would say, small. I used to joke around that, especially in the days before a so-called Power Platform, when it was more of a dynamics customer engagement, development, sales enterprise, and so and whatnot. You could say that all of the developers in Lithuania basically by names. There were just a handful of the guys. Then when low code and no code solutions kicked in, the community started growing quite a bit. So now there are more developers. But for example, our user groups are still quite small. It's like 40, 50 people show up. So nothing really crazy. Again, small country, small tech community, I would say. But it's growing and it's making more and more considerable size in our economy.
In our initial call, you classified yourself as a Power Platform skeptic. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, honestly, I don't want to talk anything really bad about Microsoft because it puts food on my table. But maybe I'm a bit skeptical about the trends and the general direction at which this whole low code, no code, approach is going towards. So to put it bluntly, I would say that this threshold that is quite low nowadays for people to get into low code, no code breeds a lot of tech people or so-called developers that are not building bulletproof or future-proof solutions. And that's where it becomes a little bit tricky because we have a lot of, Canvas applications and low-code applications that are built on top of, SharePoint and without a good engineering practices in mind. And, and this is kind of self-perpetuating circle where more developers show up and they're spending and companies are buying more into these, simple applications. And eventually we reach the point where those applications are becoming really difficult to maintain. and you just need to rebuild them. So the whole quality of stuff being developed is maybe not at the of the best quality. Basically, the whole products are not of the best quality, and there isn't much in the whole approach of Microsoft or marketing of the products that would suggest people, utilizing more sophisticated tools. So, for instance, to take a comparison, for example, with Flutterflow, and how they are positioning themselves when they're releasing, their new tools and platforms. So they never position themselves as a low-code, no-code platform, regardless of the fact that you can build applications using low-code, approaches. They still allow you to, build those applications and then export them and extend them within the, realm of proper, so-called pro. I don't even like the term, but pro code, development approach. So, for example, you download the whole project, and then you have this Flutter framework Dart code that could be, worked on and maintained and developed. So, if you would take, for example, Canvas applications, if you have something built, which is de facto standard now in the market, Canvas application with some SharePoint database. If you have this application, it really becomes difficult to extend it and build on top of it. So it reaches its technical threshold really fast, and then you need to figure out what to do next. Either you're again putting more fire onto this technical debt, bonfire, or you're rebuilding everything from scratch. So I don't really like this gap between low code, no code approach and pro code way of working. Like I see this hole within these two approaches towards building software, and this hole doesn't have any way to transition from one side to another. So only approach nowadays is to start building everything with idea in mind that you will need to extend it in the future. And that's where I see this huge problem with new developers and people getting onboarded within the whole Power Platform environment. They tend to approach it as, drag and drop kind of software building paradigm instead of actually focusing on how to build something that will last and can be, extended in the future. Yeah, that's just all demagogue in me.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's something that I'm noticing more and more often, to be honest. Every now and then, some customer kicks in and says that, okay, we need to build this integration. And then you get in all sorts of problems. So, for instance, very, very recently, I've been building the integration on Canvas application with accountancy system, and the Canvas application was built with standard connectors on Canvas apps that are not required, no model-driven apps, and then when they built it, no one actually thought that it will need to be extended to uphold the integrational standards or to uphold the business processes that are involving integrations. And then when you start taking over it and starting developing it, you see that it's very difficult to do it properly. If you want, for example, having invoice lines on the header, it becomes a problem with SharePoint, data model. If you want to have a proper, API calls to the backend or Azure functions, you already need premium connectors. So then if you want to keep the status quo for the company, to say them, okay, we will do the implementations and you won't need to pay more for running software, then you start putting a lot of different kinds of workarounds into the software until it becomes really difficult to manage. So this is why I'm a bit of a skeptic. It encourages developers to do stuff. It encourages more people to build more stuff, and this is really nice. In the end of the day, it's still, we're engineers. We're here to save time. Basically, in a sense, our job is to save time. The only resource that is limited is time, and that's what we're doing, and that's very good thing that people can do more with less. But that's also where it breeds other kind of problem when then you need to redo something from scratch without actually necessity of doing it. So that's why, in short, yeah, it's a difficult question, why you're a bit of a skeptic, but more and more grumpy I'm becoming with the days of working with these. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's data that shows that 50% of IT spend inside an organization is just on managing technical debt. And that's a lot of productive time just managing technical debt.
Yeah, I never heard about the actual percentages, but I fully agree with that. I mean, it might be possible that you're spending a lot of time just to work out problems, or going into this art of not shooting yourself in the foot. So it's quite difficult sometimes. You have to go around with it and not create that technical debt. So, and these low code platforms, they are actually the breeding ground for technical debt. Like, I've never been a very big on Canvas applications. Before I joined Macaw, usually in my previous companies, we would always build something from scratch, mainly on web resources, with some front-end framework. And, the Canvas applications, they came into my life a bit later. And this is where it actually is I got the real taste of it, because you would start building something with in mind that this is a necessity, this is just a hygiene, and this technology just absolutely must be included into the framework if you're building the software. And then turns out, that Canvas applications do not support keyboard events. Like if you want to, override keyboard event, there's no such thing. And, you're either you need to, if you're building some software, especially for the front end, either you need to plan it ahead in a waterfall-like manner and check what kind of roadblocks you will have in the future, which is very not scrummy, or you're, going and dealing with the problems, along the way. So thank God, well, not God, but the guys in Microsoft, that they came up with the PCF controls, and that actually alleviated a lot of these problems. So in some cases, you can, solve those by writing your own, extensions, like, for example, for these keyboard events. So I'm taking this example because I had to create this PCF control. Also, it's in the PCF gallery. If someone is having the same problem as I did, feel free to use it.
Nice.
It's working fine. So yeah, and this is why actually a bit more optimistic in terms of all, because these PCF controls came into light. So that's one of the good things that actually happened.
I want to talk more with you about PCF controls, but before I get there, tell me, what are your views and the differences that you've observed between the consultant versus the developer? And perhaps before you give me that view, how do you define a consultant and how do you define a developer? And these are from your points of view, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I always presented myself as a consultant, never as a developer. Maybe because I started from the consultancy side of working, but as it is with the Power Platform, I would like to sound clever here by defining consultant as some subset of developer, but in a true sense, like from classical point of view, I would say developer is someone that can work independently from the customer, mainly in the Scrum team or on in any kind of other setup without exposure to the actual customer.
Interesting.
And then the consultant is someone that most probably will do the same thing as a developer, but without the luxury of not, approaching the customer. And in a sense, I was always a little bit also skeptic on developers working within the framework of Power Platform. I'm not a big believer of developer developing in low code, no code, effective development platform in closed quarters with other developers, and then exposing only product owner, project managers, with the customer. So I think that the whole platform is actually pushing the developers to be consultants who can develop solutions. So that's why I always been a bit. I always presented myself as a consultant, though in my company, as far as I know, I'm a software engineer, like developer. But it's these days in the Power Platform, I think that you're so much more value if you can actually basically talk with the customer and explain what you're doing and why you're doing and what is the reason. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on these two different types of.
I like it. It's an interesting perspective, because I see everyone try to define, developers and or makers being a developer writes code and a maker configures the system and, brings in parts. But I like the definition that you've used, as a developer doesn't necessarily need to be in customer facing, but a consultant does, and that you're seeing this transition that a developer really needs to become more customer facing in a low code world. And that's a very unique and different way of looking at it, and I like it.
I think that the whole approach towards your classical developer, your classical solution architect, your classical consultant comes from the older days of software development, where we didn't have any kind of very easygoing frameworks to build stuff. And back in the day, you didn't have your definition of front end and back end developers, and then DevOps engineers and everything. And that came from the point that there was no luxury for one person to, learn all different kinds of stacks and technologies. It just was not cost efficient. You would have one engineer that goes into a rabbit hole of certain area, and this is how it was the most efficient way of working. And then there are some companies, some IT companies, they transitioned into this, low code, no code, or very, easygoing platform kind of working, for example, Supabase and Firebase, and a lot of cool tools, that are still considered pro code, tools, but they themselves are actually alleviating a lot of work for developers. And there isn't that much of a necessity for you to focus on certain area. You can see that I'm a really big expert, really hardcore front-end developer on Canvas applications, and everything that I'm doing is that I know PowerFX, and I know how to make a square, on the Canvas applications with round borders. That's something that is you won't get far with it. It's not something, not the rabbit hole that you want to go. So I think nowadays with these platforms, what you want to do is to have engineers that they still need to have this focal point on certain technology, but they can be more, spread across the whole stack. So you can have the one that can do Canvas applications, model-driven apps, Power BI, Azure development. It's like there's no point in my belief of having really, true engineers or developers at certain points. So I think that's why we have this definition still nowadays, though it doesn't really make sense in my mind.
Yeah, so valid. PCF controls. Tell us about your experience, why you like them, and some use cases where you've found they've been. You gave an example of keyboard shortcuts, and in my mind, I was like, "Wow, that's so cool," because it's not a visual type of experience where most PCF controls are considered visual type experiences.
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, I don't want to present myself as some sort of, front-end development guru or React guru. I started with PCF controls maybe 2.5 years ago. When they started, I slowly but surely got into working with those. And nowadays, when it comes to PCF controls, first of all, I like them because, of course, they give you this flexibility on the front-end layer. But in a sense, I'm not really focusing that much nowadays in building something on front end, but actually filling the gaps of technology that cannot be supplemented by out-of-the-box components. One of the examples is this, keyboard shortcuts, but the whole logic is not, visible for the user, and the whole PCF control is not usable, but it's still in the front end. It listens in the client side. But on the same account, for example, I like to, recently I've built one, again, like just a grid on which you can drag a picture, and then I have in the back end, the logic that reads the picture and now converts it into base64, sends it to the model-driven apps, plugins, and then it collaborates with OCR in AI model to translate it into a JSON. So the whole use case came from the really interesting situation where there was one customer that had really interesting pricing models for the products, and those pricing models were in table manner. So you have width and height, and each combination would have different price, and you could not apply any kind of normal function that would represent those prices. You can go to the polynomials, or some advanced math, but you would still have some, discrepancies. So that's why you need to, translate each and every one of those combinations. That might be, 400 combinations for one product,
yes,
into different, prices. So that's where it really, works out perfectly fine. So if without PCF controls, you would need to, utilize some maybe model-driven apps file attach functionality, and then on that attached functionality, you would again kick in the same backend logic. But then here comes the PCF controls, and it gives this really kind of low-hanging fruit of benefit for the user that you just drag the file on top of it and allow them for the backend to pick up the work faster. The more recent, actually, and the one that I really like, and it's more recent actually with the PCF controls, is the grid extensions. And you will see now even in LinkedIn community, there are more and more people starting talking about those because nowadays you can override, I think it's called Power Apps Grid Control in model-driven apps, that allows you to put your PCF control into that PCF control. It's in a sense PCF control that accepts your PCF control. So that is actually really cool, because the grids were always a big problem in model-driven apps. They were not really customizable, and if you would want to build your own grid, that's a lot of work. That's really, really a lot of work to build your own grid. And this is actually really cool functionality, because then you can have your PCF control attached to certain cell, and then you can apply your logic. So that's other area where I'm working on. Well, this is again another PCF control that I published into the library, into PCF Gallery, the so-called quick edit dialog that allows you to open, for example, the description field and edit it in a bigger field to see more from the grid line. The latest developments that I've noticed with PCF controls is that actually you can take this PCF control and build it on top of model-driven apps and hide all other model-driven apps, navigations, and features. And that actually creates you a custom React application running on model-driven apps. And very recently, I wrote this LinkedIn article about how it's very close for the Microsoft to present another backend-as-a-service platform for the developers, because everything is basically there. You have a really nice way of building your entity relationship, models with Dataverse Builder. You have your security model, which is really cool and really, really, powerful. You have your server-side, functions, or logic running on .NET Framework plugins. And then you have your front end that can be built on top of PCF controls, which also has all sorts of connectors with your, front end and back end. And you have hosting as well. You don't need to worry about hosting. So basically, you have all the tools you're required to allow users to build completely custom front ends on top of model-driven apps. It's doable right now as well. So you need to do a little bit hacky stuff. You need to include the URL parameters to hide navigation, and and some some additional settings in manifest file, and then you can have just a simple front end single page application on top of model driven apps. But I think this would be really appreciated by a lot of developers in model driven apps, because time and time again I'm having the same problem with any customer saying that, okay, we would want to have this functionality, and then you're going into this consultant mode, you're saying, yeah, but maybe let's start now with the model driven apps and let's make it more simple, and let's see how the adoption goes, and if adoption goes well, we can then think of implementing something more sophisticated. So when it comes to these front end building things with PCF controls, you can just say, yeah, no problem, we will build our front end functionality like that,
Yes.
in few days, and all the backend is there, and we can roll off. So yeah, that's what I would really like Microsoft to go for.
Yeah.
I don't think that they will do it, but yeah, this is something that I already implemented for a few of my customers. Really simple applications on top of model-driven apps that are just applications. Single page applications on Fluent UI and React, but it's fast. It's completely custom, and you don't have this instant rejection of users noticing, model-driven apps. And I think every consultant, every developer will say the same, that regardless of what you're presenting and what value you're presenting in any of Microsoft applications, people will dislike it because it's Microsoft. So I think that gives a lot of wiggle room to actually trick your users into using Microsoft without knowing it.
I like it. It gives a lot of scope, and it'll be interesting to see how the space develops. Dovydas, it's been great to have you on the show. You got some very unique perspectives, and I love your views and how you're using PCF. I think that for some time I've thought PCF has got so much more runway on it. It could do so much more, and there needs to be more adoption of it and the impact it can have in the software that is built on Dataverse. I think the back end is just, amazing. And I like this concept of it, just using it as a service, then to build whatever you want on the front end is brilliant. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So it was really nice to talk, to rant a little bit, if I may say so. So not everyone's really wants to hear me ranting about Microsoft. It's maybe too much flowers and stuff, and maybe some reality check every once in a while is nice. But yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If there's a guest you'd like to see on the show, please message me on LinkedIn. If you want to be a supporter of the show, please check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 Guy. Stay safe out there and shoot for the stars.